I'm Charlotte, I'm 32 years old, and my family just told me I don't contribute enough to deserve the Italian vacation I was paying for. It happened at dinner, a pre-trip celebration at a restaurant that I also paid for. The words, spoken so casually by my own mother, didn't just sting, they severed something deep inside me, a cord of obligation and hope that I'd been clutching for over a decade. In that moment, surrounded by the clatter of silverware and the meaningless chatter of other families, I finally understood that I wasn't their daughter or their sister. I was their utility, and my utility was about to be shut off. To understand how we got here, you have to understand the dynamic that took root after my father passed away. I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in computer science and a job offer that felt like a lottery win. My father's death was sudden, a heart attack that left a void in our lives that felt impossible to fill. But beyond the emotional devastation, it left a practical one. He had been the sole provider. My mother, Brenda, hadn't worked in 20 years. My brother, Ryan, was 19 and drifting between part-time jobs, and my sister, Chloe, was a teenager in high school. Suddenly, the financial stability we had always taken for granted was gone. I stepped up. It didn't even feel like a choice. It was just what you did. I used my signing bonus to catch up on the mortgage payments. I set my mother up with an allowance so she wouldn't have to worry about groceries or gas. I told Ryan and Chloe that their college funds were secure, that I would handle it. I remember the look on my mother's face during that time, a mixture of grief, fear, and profound gratitude. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Charlotte," she'd said, her hand clutching mine. I held onto the memory of that gratitude for a very long time, long after it had expired. To make things seamless, I used my skills as a software engineer to create a centralized payment portal for our family. It was a simple, elegant solution. I linked my primary bank account to it, and on the first of every month, it would automatically pay the mortgage on the family home, the utility bills, the car insurance, the property taxes, and even their phone bills. They never had to see a bill or worry about a due date. It was all handled. In the beginning, it was meant to be a temporary bridge, a way to keep them afloat while they got back on their feet. But somewhere along the way, the bridge became the destination. The gratitude faded slowly, replaced by a creeping sense of entitlement. My contributions became invisible like oxygen, necessary for their survival but completely unnoticed. The first time I truly felt the shift was about 5 years ago. I'd bought a new, reliable sedan for myself, my first major purchase that wasn't for someone else. A month later, Ryan and Chloe asked to borrow it for a weekend road trip with their friends. I was hesitant, but I relented. They returned it on Sunday night with a new, spiderwebbing crack in the windshield and a deep scratch along the passenger door. "A rock flew up on the highway," Ryan said with a shrug, as if that explained everything. Chloe added, "And some guy totally scraped us in a parking lot and just drove off. People are the worst." There was no apology, no offer to pay for the damages, just a casual explanation followed by an expectant silence. They expected me to handle it. When I took it to the shop, the bill was over $2,000. I paid it, of course. When I mentioned the cost to my mother, hoping for a little backup, she just sighed. "Oh, Charlotte, you know how they are. It was an accident. It's a good thing you have that high-paying job." The message was clear. My money was family money, and their irresponsibility was just a minor tax on it. Then there was my 30th birthday. It was a milestone, and I'd hoped for something special. A few weeks prior, Ryan had come to me in a panic. He'd maxed out a credit card on what he called investments for his gig economy driving, new seat covers, a fancy phone mount, a subscription to a premium satellite radio service. The bill was nearly $4,000, and the interest was piling up. He was terrified it would ruin his credit. So, for the 5th or 6th time, I cleared his debt. I transferred the money and told him to please be more careful. He was effusively thankful, promising he'd learned his lesson. On my birthday, they took me out to dinner. At the end of the meal, they presented me with a single gift bag. Inside was a generic scented candle that smelled faintly of lemon floor cleaner and a coffee mug that said, "But first, coffee." I saw the same mug in a checkout aisle for $5 a few days later. "We all pitched in," Chloe announced proudly, as if they'd procured a rare artifact. I looked at Ryan, the man whose financial mess I had just cleaned up, and he just smiled, completely oblivious. I miled back, a hollow ache spreading through my chest. I paid for the birthday dinner, too. My career was a source of both their security and their condescension. I worked hard, pulling long hours on complex coding projects, managing a team of junior engineers. It was demanding, mentally taxing work, but to them, it was a joke. Chloe, who was trying to become a social media influencer, would often post filtered pictures of herself with captions like "hustle hard." My mother would praise her endlessly. "Chloe is building her own brand, you know," she'd tell her friends on the phone. "She has such an entrepreneurial spirit." When those same friends asked what I did, my mother would say, "Oh, Charlotte does something with computers. She works from home a lot. It's very quiet." The subtext was always there. Chloe's work was glamorous and visible. Mine was nerdy, intangible, and probably easy. It didn't matter that my quiet computer work paid the mortgage on the house my mother was sitting in or funded the phone Chloe was using to build her brand. This trip to Italy was supposed to be different. It was my grand gesture, a way to try and reconnect, to create a new, happy memory that might overwrite some of the painful ones. I'd spent months planning it, booking flights, finding beautiful hotels in Rome, Florence, and a rustic villa in Tuscany. It was a trip none of them could have ever afforded on their own. I envisioned us walking through the Colosseum, sharing gelato by the Trevi Fountain, laughing over plates of pasta under the Tuscan sun. I foolishly thought this enormous, generous gift, would finally make them see me. I thought it would earn me back the title of daughter and sister. I was wrong. It only served to reveal just how little I meant to them at all. The planning of the Italy trip was my secret solace for nearly 6 months. During stressful days at work, I would take a 5-minute break to scroll through pictures of the Roman Forum or look up reviews for restaurants in Florence. It felt like I was building a bridge back to my family, plank by plank, reservation by reservation. I chose a 5-star hotel near the Spanish Steps in Rome, imagining my mother's delight. I booked a villa in Tuscany with a panoramic view of the rolling hills, picturing us all sipping wine on the terrace as the sun went down. For Chloe, I found a designer outlet not far from Florence, and for Ryan, I mapped out a route to the Ferrari Museum in Maranello. I was trying so hard to give each of them a piece of a perfect dream. I created a shared digital itinerary, complete with confirmation numbers, addresses, and daily suggestions. I presented it to them a month before our departure. They were ecstatic. Chloe immediately started planning her outfits for all the Instagram photos she would take. Ryan talked nonstop about the food. My mother started telling all her friends that her children were taking her to Italy. Not her daughter, her children. It was a small, subtle shift in language, but I noticed it. It was a way of distributing the credit, of softening the fact that one person was footing the entire bill. I let it go. I was determined to be positive. The celebratory dinner was my idea. It was 2 nights before our flight, a final hurrah before our grand adventure. I chose a nice, upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with white tablecloths and waiters who grate fresh Parmesan onto your pasta from a giant wheel of cheese. The kind of place they loved but could never afford. As I sat there, sipping my water and looking at their excited faces, a part of me felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The ambient chatter of the restaurant, the smell of garlic and basil in the air, it all felt like the prelude to a happy memory. For the first 20 minutes, it was exactly what I'd hoped for. We talked about what we were most excited to see, whether we'd packed enough, and how early we needed to get to the airport. "I just bought the most amazing portable charger," Chloe said, pulling a sleek, pink device from her purse. "It's solar-powered. I'm going to need it for the private wine tour. The lighting in the vineyards will be perfect for my feed around golden hour." My mind snagged on her words. "Private wine tour?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Which one is that? I don't remember booking it." I had booked a tour, yes, but it was for all 4 of us, a group tour at a well-known Chianti vineyard. Chloe glanced at my mother, a flicker of annoyance, passing between them. "Oh, it's not the one you booked, Charlotte," she said, her tone suddenly dismissive. Mom found a much more exclusive boutique place. It's supposed to be amazing. A small, cold knot began to form in my stomach. She did. When did you book this? A few weeks ago, Ryan chimed in, oblivious to the changing atmosphere. He was busy slathering butter on a piece of bread. And we're doing that special cooking class. In Florence, too, the one that ends with dinner on a private rooftop. It's going to be epic. I stared at him. A cooking class, a private rooftop dinner. These were not on the itinerary I had painstakingly built. These were not things I had been invited to. You booked other things, without telling me? The question came out quieter than I intended, laced with a hurt I couldn't hide. My mother, Brenda, finally looked at me directly. Her expression wasn't apologetic or even sheepish. It was stern, almost defensive, as if I were the one being unreasonable. Charlotte, we just made a few small adjustments, she said, dabbing her lips with a napkin. The tour you booked was a bit common. This new one is much more intimate, and the cooking class is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. But I wasn't included. I could feel the blood draining from my face. You booked these things for the three of you on a trip that I planned and paid for. The air grew thick and heavy. Chloe set her fork down with a clatter and let out an exasperated sigh, the kind she used when I asked if she'd contributed to the utility bill that month. Oh my God, Charlotte, don't be so dramatic. It's not a big deal. It feels like a big deal to me, I said, my voice trembling slightly. It feels like you're cutting me out of my own gift to you. That's when my mother delivered the first blow. She looked at me, her eyes as cold and hard as river stones, and said the words that would echo in my mind for days. Honestly, Charlotte, some of these experiences are very expensive. They're for the people who are actually contributing to the memories and the atmosphere of the trip. I seemed to slow down, actually contributing. The phrase hung in the air between us, thick with poison. All the code I'd written, all the deadlines I'd met, all the promotions I'd earned, all of it in her eyes was not a contribution. The thousands of dollars I had poured into this trip, into their lives, every single month for 10 years, that wasn't a contribution. The money was just a silent, invisible force like gravity. What they contributed, their atmosphere, their memories, that was what mattered. I was the banker, and they were the talent. I was so stunned, I couldn't even form a response. I just stared at her, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then came the second blow, the one that sealed it. Chloe leaned forward, a smug, cruel little smirk playing on her lips. She looked me right in the eye. Frankly, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, you should just be happy we told you at all. Just be happy we told you. Not sorry, not embarrassed. Be grateful for the scraps of information they deigned to toss my way. In that instant, the fantasy I'd clung to for a decade, the fantasy of a loving, grateful family that I could one day win back with enough generosity, crumbled into dust. The warmth of the restaurant vanished, replaced by an Arctic chill that emanated from the three people sitting across from me. They weren't just ungrateful, they were contemptuous. They resented me for the very support that kept them afloat, and they had just handed me the undeniable proof. I looked from my mother's stony face to Chloe's smirking one, to Ryan, who was now staring down at his plate, refusing to meet my eyes. He knew it was wrong, but he would never, ever stand up to them for me. There was nothing left to say. There was nothing left to salvage. A strange, unnerving calm washed over me. The hurt was still there, a deep, seismic shock, but it was being rapidly overtaken by a cold, hard clarity. The path forward, which had always seemed so complicated, so fraught with guilt and obligation, was now breathtakingly simple. I picked up my own napkin and placed it on the table. I looked at my mother. "Thank you for the honesty," I said. My voice was even, devoid of the emotion that was raging inside me. "It's good to finally know where I stand." I stood up, pushed my chair in, and walked out of the restaurant without looking back, leaving them to figure out the bill. The drive home was surreal. The city lights blurred into long streaks of red and white, a watercolor painting viewed through a film of tears I refused to let fall. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but inside, a hurricane was raging. It was a tempest of a decade's worth of suppressed anger, quiet humiliations, and the bone-deep ache of unreciprocated love. Yet, piercing through the storm was a single, sharp ray of light: clarity. For years, my life had been a complex equation of their needs versus my own, with their needs always, always winning. I had told myself it was my duty. I had told myself it was what my father would have wanted. I had told myself that one day, they would see, they would understand, they would be grateful. The dinner wasn't just an insult, it was a release. They had, with their own words, given me permission to stop trying. They had told me I didn't. Contribute, fine, I would take them at their word. When I walked into my apartment, the silence was a comfort. This space was mine. Every piece of furniture, every book on the shelf, every bill paid was a product of my own labor. There were no ghosts of entitlement here, no lingering expectations. It was my sanctuary, and I had been neglecting it, pouring all my resources into their house instead of my home. I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to my home office, the command center of my life. I sat down in my ergonomic chair, the one I'd bought to help with back pain from long hours spent coding, and woke up my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating my face in the darkroom. My first destination was the payment portal, the one I had designed myself all those years ago. The interface was clean and simple, a testament to my belief that complex problems could have elegant solutions. On the dashboard, I could see the list of upcoming automated payments: Brenda's mortgage, due on the 1st, the family cell phone plan for 4 lines, 3 of which were not mine, Ryan's car insurance, the cable and internet bill for their house. It was a neat, orderly list of my servitude. My mouse hovered over the settings menu. There was a button I'd coded in for emergencies, a master switch. It was labeled "Deactivate all payments and suspend account." I had imagined I might use it if my bank account were ever compromised. I never imagined it would be my heart that was compromised. I clicked it. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure you want to permanently deactivate this portal? This action cannot be undone." A ghost of my former self whispered in my ear, urging me to stop. What will they do? How will they manage? Then I heard my mother's voice, cold and dismissive. "Italy S for those who actually contribute." I clicked confirm. The screen refreshed and the dashboard was gone, replaced by a simple message: "Account inactive." It was done. The financial lifeline was cut. Next, I opened a new browser tab, the airline's website. I logged into my account and found the booking for Italy. 4 round-trip premium economy tickets. I clicked cancel flight. Another box popped up, warning me about cancellation fees. I didn't care. The refund minus the fees would be credited back to my card. Click. A confirmation email arrived in my inbox a second later. "Your flight booking has been successfully canceled." Then the hotels, the beautiful place by the Spanish Steps. Canceled. The charming hotel in Florence. Canceled. The sprawling Tuscan villa with the panoramic view I had so lovingly picked out. Canceled. Tour after tour, reservation after reservation, I dismantled the dream I had so carefully constructed. With every click, I felt a strange lightness, as if I were shedding a heavy, suffocating coat I'd been wearing for 10 years. I wasn't finished. The tendrils of my support had crept into every corner of their digital lives. I logged into my streaming media account. Under Managed Devices, I saw them all listed: Brenda's iPad, Chloe's smart TV, Ryan's MacBook. I revoked access for each one by one. I did the same for my family cloud storage plan, where they backed up all their photos and files, and for my premium music subscription. The final step was the most personal. I picked up my phone, its screen cool against my palm. I opened my contacts. First, Mom. My finger hovered over her name. All the years of hoping for her approval, of craving her warmth, flashed through my mind. I thought of her face in the restaurant, hard and unforgiving. I pressed block this caller. Next, Chloe. I saw her smug smirk, heard her cutting words. Just be happy we told you at all. Block. Finally, Ryan, my brother, the one I had bilayed out time and time again, the one who stood by and said nothing. His silence was its own betrayal. Block. I set the phone down on my desk. The room was utterly silent. There were no more notifications to check, no more accounts to manage, no more fires to put out. The work was done. I expected to feel a surge of rage or maybe a wave of crushing guilt. Instead, I felt quiet. It was a profound and hollow quiet, the kind that comes after a long and violent storm. The landscape of my life had been flattened, all the familiar, toxic structures torn down. All that was left was me, standing in the quiet aftermath. I walked out of my office, leaving the laptop open on the desk. I went into my bedroom, changed into my pajamas, and climbed into bed. I didn't check my phone again. I didn't replay the scene at the restaurant. I simply closed my eyes, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke to the gentle glow of morning light filtering through my blinds. For a few blissful seconds, my mind was a clean slate. I stretched, feeling a peculiar lack of tension in my shoulders. The usual low-grade anxiety that served as my die. My alarm clock was simply gone. I felt rested, truly rested. Then the memory of the previous night flooded back in. The dinner, the words, the clicks of my mouse dismantling a decade of my life. I sat up, half expecting a wave of regret to crash over me. But it didn't come. There was no panic, no remorse. There was only the quiet hum of the air conditioner and the peaceful stillness of my apartment. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen to make coffee. The ritual was calming, a familiar set of motions in a world that had been irrevocably altered. As the coffee brewed, filling the air with its rich aroma, I allowed myself to pick up my phone. I didn't unlock it right away. I just looked at the lock screen. It was littered with notifications, all neatly contained within their little banners. A string of missed calls from blocked caller. A series of iMessage notifications that simply read blocked. The sheer volume told a story of escalating panic, but it was a story happening somewhere else, to other people. It felt strangely distant, like reading a news headline about a disaster in a foreign country. I unlocked the phone and went straight to my blocked messages folder, a digital graveyard I rarely visited. It was all there, a real-time log of their dawning horror. It started around 4:30 a.m., a single cheerful text from Chloe, at the airport, so excited I could burst, airplane. Then, silence for about 20 minutes. 4:52 a.m. Ryan, hey, the check-in kiosk isn't finding our reservation. Weird. 4:55 a.m. Chloe, the lady at the desk can't find it either. Can you send me the confirmation number again? 4:58 a.m. Mom, Charlotte, call me. There seems to be a problem with the tickets. 5:01 a.m. Ryan, seriously, where are you? The agent said there's no booking under our names at all. 5:05 a.m. Chloe, this is not funny, Charlotte. Are you playing some kind of joke? We're going to miss our flight. The calls started then. A frantic series of them, one after another from all three of them. I could picture it perfectly. My mother's mounting hysteria, Chloe's indignant rage, and Ryan's useless floundering caught between them. And then, the final message, the one from the Reddit title. The one that summed up their complete helplessness. 5:17 a.m. Ryan, we can't board, call the airline. The all-caps plea, stripped of any pretense. The demand that I, the person they had just dismissed as a non-contributor, immediately spring into action and fix the problem they couldn't even comprehend. It was the culmination of their entire worldview. A problem had arisen, and therefore, Charlotte must solve it. I read the message, took a calm sip of my freshly brewed coffee, and put the phone down on the counter, screen side down. I didn't feel a flicker of an urge to call the airline. I didn't feel a twinge of guilt for their predicament. They were standing in an airport, facing the first real consequence of their behavior in over a decade, and I was in my quiet kitchen, enjoying my coffee. In the past, a message like that would have sent me into a spiral of panic. I would have dropped everything, my heart pounding with second-hand stress. I'd be on the phone with customer service, frantically pulling up confirmation emails, apologizing profusely for an issue that wasn't my fault, assuring my family that I was handling it. My entire morning, maybe my entire day, would have been consumed by fixing their mess, and my reward would have been a begrudging, "Well, it's about time," before they moved on to their next demand. But today was different. I buttered a piece of toast. I sat down at my small kitchen table, the one that overlooked the city, and watched the sun climb higher in the sky. The silence in my apartment was the main event. It was no longer an absence of sound, it was a presence. It was the sound of peace. It was the sound of my own life, waiting to be lived. The phone buzzed again on the counter, and again. The vibrations were angry and insistent, but from across the room, they were just a faint, irrelevant noise. For the first time, their chaos couldn't reach me. I had built a firewall, not with code, but with a single, powerful decision. I finished my toast, drank my coffee, and started to think about what I wanted to do with my day. My day. The possibilities felt endless. The rest of the morning passed in a state of tranquil defiance. I tidied up my apartment, watered my plants, and replied to work emails, all while my phone continued its futile buzzing from the kitchen counter. Each ignored vibration was a small victory, a reaffirmation of the boundary I had drawn. By lunchtime, the frantic storm of calls and texts had subsided, likely replaced by the exhaustion of defeat. They were probably in a cab heading back to the house they could no longer afford, the reality of their situation beginning to sink in. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a detached sort of clinical observation. The experiment was underway. The results were coming in. Around 2 p.m., the phone rang again. This time, however, it wasn't a blocked number. It was an unknown number from an area code I recognized, the town where my aunt lived. My heart gave a little lurch. This was it, the first contact from the outside world. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the accept button. It was my Aunt Carol, my late father's sister. Carol was the opposite of my mother in every conceivable way. She was a no-nonsense, pragmatic high school science teacher who had raised 2 self-sufficient kids of her own. She had always been kind to me, but she maintained a polite distance from my mother and my siblings, her disapproval of their lifestyle a quiet but palpable thing. She never said anything directly, but you could feel it in her measured silences and the way her eyes would tighten when Brenda would brag about some new purchase. I knew she was the only one in the family who might actually listen. I took a deep breath and answered the call. "Hello." "Charlotte, it's Carol." Her voice was exactly as I remembered it, calm, clear, and cutting straight to the point. There was no preamble. "Brenda just called me. It was quite a performance. She was hysterical, going on about being stranded at the airport and something about you ruining her life. She wasn't making a lick of sense. I figured I'd call the person who usually does." The relief that washed over me was so intense it almost made my knees weak. She wasn't calling to attack. She was calling to investigate. She was calling me, the person who makes sense. "Hi, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "So," she continued, "are you going to tell me what's really going on? Did you cancel their trip to Italy?" There was no judgment in her tone, only a direct request for facts. That was all the encouragement I needed. The dam broke, and I told her everything. I started with the dinner, repeating the cruel words my mother and sister had thrown at me. Then I went further back, recounting a decade of slights and humiliations, the damaged car, the thoughtless birthday gifts, the constant dismissal of my career, the endless financial bailouts. I explained the payment portal and how I had finally, after 10 long years, shut it down. I laid the entire, ugly story bare. I spoke for nearly 10 minutes straight, without interruption. When I finally finished, the silence on the other end of the line stretched for a few long seconds. I held my breath, bracing myself for a lecture on family obligation. But what came was validation, pure, simple, and powerful. "Good for you," Carol said, her voice firm. "It's about damn time." I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, the first tears I'd shed through this whole ordeal. They weren't tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. "Your father," she went on, her voice softening slightly, He would be so proud of the woman you've become, Charlotte, but he would be furious to see how they've used you. He asked you to look after them, I know he did. But looking after people and enabling them are two very different things. Brenda has been teaching those kids to be helpless their whole lives, and you became a part of that lesson. It wasn't your fault, but it had to stop. I just feel guilty, I admitted, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. They have no idea how to handle anything. And whose fault is that? She shot back, her pragmatism returning like a splash of cold water. Is it the job of a 32-year-old woman to manage the lives of 3 able-bodied adults? No, it is not. You gave them a 10-year safety net. That's more than most people ever get. Now it's time for them to learn how to fall and get back up on their own. We talked for another half hour. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She offered practical advice. She told me to expect them to try and manipulate me with guilt, anger, and pity. She told me to stand firm. She told me that what I was feeling wasn't the absence of my family, but the beginning of my own life. And listen, she said just before we hung up. If they show up at your door and you don't want to deal with them, you pack a bag and you drive down here. My guest room is always open. No questions asked. When I ended the call, I felt like a different person. The validation from someone I respected so deeply was like a steel beam reinforcing my resolve. Aunt Carol's words had reframed the entire situation. I wasn't the villain who had abandoned her family. I was the person who had finally decided to save herself. I hadn't destroyed their lives. I had simply handed them back the reins to their own. What they did with them was no longer my responsibility. The first call had been from an ally, and it had given me the strength I needed for the confrontation I knew was still to come. It took them 2 days, 2 days of silence on my end, and I can only imagine escalating panic and chaos on theirs. I spent those 2 days rediscovering the quiet rhythm of my own life. I went for a long walk in the park, I read a book, I cooked a meal just for myself without having to consider anyone else's preferences. It was glorious, but I knew the peace was temporary. The confrontation was inevitable. It came on a Tuesday evening. The intercom in my apartment buzzed, a harsh, demanding sound that broke the evening's tranquility. I looked at the small video screen, and there they were, the 3 of them, huddled together on the sidewalk in front of my building, looking up at the camera with a mixture of anger and desperation. Brenda, Chloe, and Ryan, the unholy trinity of entitlement. My first instinct was to ignore them, just let them stand there until they gave up. But Aunt Carol's words echoed in my mind. Stand firm. Hiding wasn't standing firm. I needed to face them, not for their sake, but for mine. I needed to close this chapter myself. I pressed the button, hello. My mother's voice, sharp and laced with fury, shot through the speaker. Charlotte, let us up. We need to talk to you right now. It wasn't a request, it was a command. The lobby is open, I said calmly. I'll come down. I refused to let them into my sanctuary. The lobby, a neutral space, would be the battleground. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and rode the elevator down. The glass doors slid open, and I saw them waiting. They looked terrible. Their faces were pale and drawn, their clothes rumpled. The stress of the last 48 hours was written all over them. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of something resembling pity, but it vanished the moment my mother opened her mouth. How could you? She hissed, taking a step toward me. Her voice was low and trembling with rage. How could you do this to your own family? To abandon us at the airport? It was the most humiliating experience of my life. Chloe was right behind her, her arms crossed, her face a mask of contempt. You are the most selfish, cruel person I have ever met. You think because you have money you can just play with people's lives? We had plans, memories we were going to make. Ryan just stood there, shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes fixed on the floor. The silent, complicit coward. I let their accusations hang in the air of the pristine, quiet lobby. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just stood there and waited until they had vented the initial burst of their fury. When my mother finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. I didn't abandon you, I said, my voice as calm and steady as a frozen lake. I took you at your word. Brenda stared at me, confused. What are you talking about? At dinner, I said, looking directly at her. You told me the trip to Italy was for those who actually contribute to the memories and the atmosphere. You made it very clear that my financial support didn't count as a real contribution. So, I removed the one contribution I was allowed to make. I then turned my gaze to Chloe. And you told me I should be happy that you told me about your secret plans at all. And you were right, I am happy. I'm happy you were all finally honest with me. You showed me exactly what you think of me. You showed me that I'm not family. I'm an ATM, so I did what any sensible person would do. I shut the machine down. Their faces shifted from anger to disbelief. They were so used to their own narrative that hearing it played back to them, stripped of all its self-serving justifications, left them speechless. This isn't about one dinner, is it? I continued, my voice gaining strength. This is about 10 years. It's about the car you wrecked and expected me to fix without an apology. It's about the thousands of dollars of debt I cleared for you, Ryan, just before you pitched in for a $5 mug for my 30th birthday. It's about you, Mom, praising Chloe's influencer career while dismissing my actual career as just playing on the computer, even though it paid for the very roof over your head. I laid out every grievance, every past slight I had cataloged in Chapter 1 of my memory. With each example, I saw their indignation falter, replaced by a flicker of recognition, of shame. They couldn't deny these things had happened. They had just never expected to be held accountable for them. Brenda tried to recover, shifting her tactics from anger to guilt. But we're your family, she whispered, her eyes welling up with tears. Your father would have wanted you to take care of us. No, I said, my voice hard. My father would have wanted me to be respected. He would have wanted you to be grateful. He would have wanted his other 2 children to grow up and act like adults. Don't you dare use his memory to try and manipulate me. Not anymore. Chloe, seeing that the tide was turning, let out a scoff. Fine, so what now? You're just going to cut us off. What are W.E. supposed to do? Mom can't afford the mortgage. That's right, I said. I'm cutting you off. The payment portal is gone. The credit cards are canceled, all of it. As for what you're supposed to do, that's for you to figure out. You are all adults. It's time you started acting like it. Get jobs, create a budget, pay your own bills. It's what the rest of the world does. I looked at the 3 of them, truly looked at them, and for the first time, I didn't see my family. I saw 3 strangers I had been subsidizing. The emotional hold they had over me was broken. My part in this is over, I said, my voice softening, not with pity but with finality. I wish you the best, truly, but I will be wishing it from a distance. I turned and walked toward the elevators, not waiting for a response. I could hear my mother start to sob behind me, a desperate, wailing sound. I didn't look back. I stepped into the elevator, and as the doors slid shut, closing them out of my sight, I felt the last, final shackle fall away. The weeks following the confrontation were the quietest of my adult life. There were no more frantic calls, no angry texts, no dramatic appearances at my doorstep. It was as if a constant, high-frequency noise that I had grown accustomed to had finally been switched off. The silence was vast, and at first, a little unnerving. I kept checking my phone out of habit, expecting a new crisis to have erupted, but there was nothing. The first major change I made was starting therapy. For years, I had told myself I didn't have the time or the emotional bandwidth to deal with my own issues because I was too busy managing everyone else's. With that burden gone, I found I had plenty of both. My therapist helped me unpack the complex layers of guilt and obligation that had been woven into my identity since my father's death. She helped me see that my value as a person was not tied to my usefulness to others. It was a slow, difficult process, but with each session, I felt a little lighter, a little more myself. Aunt Carol called once a week to check in. She'd heard through the family grapevine that Brenda had been forced to put the family house on the market and that they were looking for a small apartment to rent. Ryan had apparently picked up more hours with his driving gig, and Chloe was handing out resumes at retail stores, her influencer dreams clashing with the harsh reality of needing to pay a phone bill. "Are you okay with that?" Carol asked gently. "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. There was no joy in their struggle, but there was no guilt either. It was simply the natural consequence of the choices they had made. They were learning to swim in the deep end after a decade in the wading pool. It wasn't my job to be their lifeguard anymore. I started reconnecting with friends I had let drift away, friends whose invitations I had often turned down because of some manufactured family drama or financial fire I had to put out. I had coffee with a friend from college and realized how much I had missed simple, reciprocal conversation. We talked about her life, my life, our hopes, our frustrations. It was a balanced exchange, not a one-way deposition of needs. I poured my newfound free time and energy into myself. I joined a hiking club and spent my weekends exploring trails, breathing in the fresh air, feeling my body grow stronger. I started taking a painting class, something I'd always wanted to do. My first canvases were clumsy and amateurish, but the act of creating something just for the joy of it, with no expectation of it being useful or profitable, was incredibly liberating. One evening, about 3 months after the confrontation, I was sitting at my computer after work. On a whim, I opened a travel website. I typed Rome, Italy into the destination box. Pictures of the Colosseum, the Trevi Fountain, and the vibrant streets filled my screen. I felt a pang, not of sadness for the trip that wasn't, but of longing for the experience I still wanted to have. The original trip had been about them. Every choice, every booking, had been filtered through the lens of what would make them happy. It was never about me, but what did I want to see? What did I want to do? I closed my eyes and pictured it. I saw myself wandering through the Borghese Gallery at my own pace, sitting at a small cafe in Trastevere with a book and a cappuccino, with no one rushing me or complaining. I saw myself taking a train to the coast, just because I could. I opened my eyes, I navigated to the airline's website. I searched for flights for one. A list of options appeared. I found a direct flight leaving in 6 weeks. My mouse hovered over the Book Now button. There was no hesitation, no guilt, no second guessing. I clicked. The confirmation email arrived a moment later. "Your trip to Rome is confirmed." A slow, genuine smile spread across my face. This trip wasn't an olive branch or a grand gesture. It wasn't a gift to earn someone's love or a desperate attempt to manufacture a happy memory. It was just for me. The journey wouldn't be about fixing a broken family. It would be about exploring the world as a whole person, free and unburdened on my own terms. My new beginning was waiting for me under the Italian sun. Am I the jerk for cutting my family off? Maybe in their story I am, but in my story I'm finally the hero, and I was heading to Rome to celebrate.